I recently stared down a nightmare that, if I told it out loud without proof, half the neighborhood would swear I made it up just to stir trouble. Karen's son didn't just test the rules, he tested physics. Crashed his Mustang straight through my cedar fence at dawn, then tried to stick me with the damages. Their excuse? That my fence was illegally placed and needed to be corrected. The truth? The only correction that morning was the tow truck hauling away his wreck while Karen and her brat were crying to the police. But let me start at the very beginning. The sound that woke me wasn't a burglar alarm. It wasn't a bark or a scream. It was something sharp and ugly, metal against wood in a crunch so final it felt like a sentence. My body moved before my eyes opened. After all these years, I've got that father-husband reflex. Wake up running. Sam sat up beside me, the glow of her phone throwing lines across her face. "Cole, what was that?" she whispered, voice taut. I flicked the blinds open. The neighborhood was still black with pre-dawn, only porch lights and a distant security lamp painting the street. And there it was, under the weak yellow flood. A silver Mustang, nose buried where my fence used to be. Cedar posts splintered like matchsticks. The front end looked like a crushed soda can steaming in the cold air. The world was asleep, but here, our quiet suburb had just been shattered apart at 5:17 a.m. Sam's hand closed hard around my arm. Her face shifted from confusion to dread. "We have a new lawn ornament," I muttered, flat, cold, already calculating next steps. Panic doesn't solve problems. A figure staggered from behind the driver's door. Lanky, clumsy, trying to look upright. But I knew that walk. Of course I did. Brad Dawson. The teenage terror of Lakeside. Karen Dawson's pride and joy. If arrogance had a mascot, it would look like Brad climbing out of that Mustang. He swayed against the car, phone in hand, already dialing. My stomach tightened. I knew exactly who he was calling. "Call 911, I told Sam, my voice smooth but clipped. "Single vehicle collision. Property damage. Driver looks impaired. Facts only. Then pull the door cam footage." She was already on it. That's why we worked. I handled the analog in the moment. She pulled the digital strings in the background, quietly weaving it all together. I slid into my boots and stepped out into the wet morning air. The silence was broken only by the faint hiss of the Mustang's burnt rubber and the metallic ticking of the hot engine cooling far too quickly. The air smelled sour, burnt. That mix of rubber smoke and whatever cheap strawberry air freshener Brad had hanging from his mirror. Brad was leaning clumsily against his trunk, phone to his ear. His eyes were unfocused, wide but not scared. When he saw me, he huffed a sloppy half-smile. "Hey man," he mumbled. "Crazy, right? Your fence. It just jumped out." I stopped a few feet from him, crossing my arms. I said nothing, just looked from his pale, unsteady face to the black skid marks arcing across the asphalt, to the pile of shattered cedar and the smoking wreck of his car. The skid told the whole story. Too fast into the corner, too much horsepower, no control. That silence? Silence rattles kids like him more than shouting ever could. And then, right on cue, down the street, in silk slippers, robe flapping like a flag of war, came Karen Dawson. If HOA rulers wore costumes, hers was a silk robe and a glare sharp enough to split glass. She skipped the wreck entirely, beelining toward me. "Maddox! What did you do?" she barked. "Morning, Karen," I said blandly, deadpan in my boots. "Your boy just test drove my fence." "That fence is a trap," she spit back instantly. "It's too close to the road. My Bradley could have been killed." "He's fine," I said, nodding at Brad, who was still swaying like wet laundry. "My fence isn't." Before I could get another word out, Sam's voice chimed from the lit window, calm and precise as a news anchor. "Everything's already documented. Door cam is live. Oh, and Karen," she gave a cheerful wave, "you're being recorded too. Door cam, driveway cam, and Mike's ring. Morning, Mike." "Morning," came a sleepy voice from the hedge next door. Mike had his phone up, his screen glowing like an extra flood lamp. Karen froze mid-rant, flicker of something flash across her face. Panic, then rage when she realized the script wasn't hers to control. She pulled her thin robe tighter and hissed, "You can't film me without consent." "The street's public space," I told her, leveling my voice like a fax stamp. "Your robe is your choice." Her jaw clicked shut for one blessed second. And then came the cruisers. Lights moving slow, casting the whole scene red-blue over splintered fence boards and Karen's furious scowl. One officer stepped out. Mid-40s, tired eyes, the face of a man who had heard every excuse worth hearing. "What's going on?" he asked calmly. Karen pounced, stepping toward him with shaking hands and words sharpened to knives. "Officer, thank goodness!" "This man's fence is an illegal trap. It leapt onto the street and destroyed my son's car." My Bradley is traumatized. I demand Cole Maddox be cited and pay for all damages. The officer blinked slowly. First at her, then at Brad, then at the fence. Then finally, at the not-so-subtle skid marks curling like black signatures across the road. That blink carried weariness and judgment at once. He turned to me. "This your property?" "That's right," I nodded. "Woke us up not even 15 minutes ago." "Name?" the officer asked, glancing at Brad. Brad Dawson," the boy mumbled, suddenly finding the pavement very fascinating. The officer's brow furrowed. "Son, have you been drinking tonight?" Brad shook his head fast. "No, sir." Too fast, too eager. The cop leaned in slightly, nostrils flaring, and frowned. "I need you at the cruiser," he said sharply. "A few simple tests." Brad's hand twitched to his pocket. A glimpse of foil. Breath mints? Strips? A cover. Immediately, the officer barked, "Do not put anything in your mouth." Karen swooped in like a hawk, waving a water bottle. "Hydrate, sweetie." The officer's hand shot up, palms stiff like a stop sign. "Ma'am, do not interfere again." Brad stumbled through the field tests like a clown costume dropped onto the wrong act. Heel to toe became a new dance move. Fingers missed his own nose. His sway was almost theatrical. Meanwhile, a second officer circled the Mustang, flashlight cutting clean through the dark interior. When his beam caught small metal bottles clanking on the passenger floor, he bent, reached, and held them up high. "Nitrous oxide," he said flatly. "Whippets, chargers." Brad's face drained color. Karen looked like someone had thrown water in hers. "Sir, please," she tried, voice trembling now. This is harassment. My son is the victim here. You should be questioning him." And she jabbed her finger toward me. But the officer's voice dropped low, cold, firm, the kind of tone that doesn't allow space for more words. "Ma'am, step back, now. Let me do my job." And for the first time, Karen actually did. Within minutes, Brad was cuffed, read his rights, and prepped for transport. Probable cause was clear. Impaired driving, property damage, possession. A blood draw would follow. While they led Brad away, the second officer leaned further into the Mustang, and when he backed out again, he carried something worse than laughing gas, a cheap, black burner phone. No case, no stickers, nothing. Just plastic anonymity. He powered it down and dropped it into an evidence bag. "We'll get a warrant for this," he said. The look the officers exchanged wasn't about minor vandalism anymore. It was bigger. This wasn't just screwing around. This was networked. Communication. Organized. Tow truck lights painted everything in surreal yellow and amber. Hook chains clanged, the Mustang groaned, and Karen Dawson's last screams of protest shattered what was left of her midnight pride. But it didn't matter. The scene told its own truth, and her son's story had already been torn to shreds, much like my fence. Standing in the chill of morning, the neighborhood curtains twitching with gleeful eyes behind them, I knew this wasn't the end. My fence was only the first casualty. This was about Karen's image, and Karen would bleed the HOA dry to salvage it. And now that burner phone? That was the storm coming on the horizon. Sam came to my side, her hand curling around mine, passing me a hot mug. Coffee, warmth in the middle of madness. We looked at the gap where my cedar fence stood hours ago. "I saved the footage," she said. Mustang flew fast into the curve, straight to the boards. "No jumping fence? Just a bad driver?" I smiled faintly. That was Sam. Always 5 steps ahead. Proof gathered, strategy already brewing. But my mind wasn't quiet. Neighbors' blinds twitched. Karen's whisper campaign would start before sunrise. "This isn't about the fence anymore," I told her quietly. "It's about her reputation, her perfect son, her perfect neighborhood. She'll throw the HOA at us. Every violation in the book, made up or not." Sam's jaw tightened. "She can throw what she wants." Cole, her eyes narrowed, steady, certain. "We've got video. We've got truth. Truth's a start," I replied. "But we need the bigger picture." That burner phone. It made the cop's eyes widen. That wasn't about joyriding anymore. The rims, the kit, this was racing, organized, coordinated, and if they've been racing around our streets... I trailed off, staring at the skid marks. It hadn't been a random crash. It had been inevitable. Sam nodded slowly, already a step ahead. "We need more eyes on the street. Wider than just our cams." "How many delivery trucks come by here each day?" I asked quietly. She pulled out her phone, thumbed through our Amazon history. "We had a delivery yesterday afternoon. Prime Vaughn. They've all got cameras. 360-degree coverage." "They do," she said, looking up at me with the same sharp glint I'd fallen for years ago. "And drivers," I added, "are creatures of habit. The same drivers often run the same routes. If we can figure out who the driver was, maybe his camera caught something. It was a long shot, but it was better than sitting around waiting for Karen to make her next move. Sam, my digital wizard, dove into her laptop. She found the delivery window from the day before and cross-referenced it with neighborhood social media groups. People post everything these days, including complaints about delivery drivers or pictures of their packages arriving. Within an hour, she had a name, a driver named Marcus, who was a regular on our route. She found his public profile and crafted a careful, polite message. She explained that there had been an accident, and we were trying to piece together the events leading up to it. She offered him $100 for his time if he'd be willing to talk to us and check his vehicle's footage from the previous night. We didn't mention racing. We didn't mention the Dawsons. We just played the part of concerned homeowners trying to sort out some property damage. While she worked her magic, I went outside to do a more thorough assessment of the damage. That's when my neighbor Mike poked his head over his own perfectly manicured hedge. Mike was a nice enough guy, retired, spent most of his time worrying about his lawn and repeating jokes he heard on the radio. "Morning, Cole," he said, his eyes wide as he took in the wreckage. "Heard the commotion. Everything all right?" "Just another quiet morning in the suburbs, Mike," I said, prying a piece of Mustang grill out of a splintered fence post. "Wowers," he said, shaking his head. "I saw the whole thing on the news feed. Karen Dawson's kid, huh? She's telling everyone your fence just well that it just jumped right out at him." He said it with a straight face, as if he were reporting a legitimate possibility. "That's the story, Mike," I said, not missing a beat. "Aggressive fence. It's a new breed they're making. Very territorial." Mike blinked, processing this. "Huh. Learn something new every day." He shook his head again and went back to trimming his hedges. By afternoon, Marcus, the delivery driver, agreed to meet. One coffee later, he pulled up his van's dash cam. There they were at 10 p.m. The silver Mustang, a black Honda, a blue Subaru, kids milling, phones out. On his next pass, the cars launched, engines screaming. Sam grabbed the file. Marcus signed a short statement and his company sent a certified copy for court. "They treat this place like a track," he said. The thumb drive felt heavy. Now we needed their nest. The burner's pings pointed at the clubhouse. A week later, a thick HOA letter landed. "She's weaponizing the HOA," I said. "Bad move." Karen didn't just mail the notice. She marched to my curb and stapled a fluorescent final warning to my mailbox like a sheriff in a spaghetti western. "Tampering with federal property is bold," I said. "So ice ugliness," she said, stapling again for emphasis. "Expect daily fines until your eyesore is corrected. Also, I've alerted the community forum. People need to know a certain homeowner is attracting incidents." Our phones pinged. Her post was already live. "Public safety alert. Some residents encourage chaos by keeping dangerous, non-compliant structures. Please report." Attached a photo of my cratered fence tastefully cropped to exclude the Mustang-shaped cause. Sam typed thumbs quick, responding with facts, she said. She uploaded the crash clip, then added a poll titled, "Did the fence jump?" with options no and also no. Within minutes, the votes were a landslide. Mike commented, "Aggressive fence update remains domesticated." Karen replied with 16 exclamation points and a paragraph about community values. Sam pinned the police report number under it like a name tag. That Thursday night, the HOA meeting convened in the clubhouse. It was held, ironically, in the community clubhouse, the same place we suspected the racing crew was using as their late-night headquarters. The room was beige and soulless, filled with uncomfortable folding chairs and thesmol of stale coffee. About 20 of our neighbors were there, most of them looking bored, just waiting to get the meeting over with so they could go home and watch TV. Karen Dawson sat at the head table, flanked by 2 of her loyal board members, a pair of sycophants who nodded at everything she said. She looked composed, powerful in her lament. She ran through the usual agenda items, budget reports, landscaping updates, a tedious debate about the approved shades of beige for mailbox posts. Then she got to the new business section. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. "Finally," she announced, her voice resonating with false authority. "We must address a serious issue of property neglect. Mr. Cole Maddox of 112 Oak Street has allowed his property to fall into a state of disrepair, creating an eyesore and a potential hazard for the entire community." A murmur went through the room. People shifted in their seats to look at me. I just sat there, my expression neutral, my hands resting on a manila folder in my lap. "As you know," she continued, "our covenants are clear. They are the bedrock of our community's value and appeal. We cannot allow one homeowner's negligence to undermine the standards we all agree to uphold. Therefore, the board has issued fines totaling $1,750 and has demanded immediate remediation." She looked directly at me. Mr. Maddox, do you have anything to say before the board votes to ratify these fines? This was her moment, the public shaming. She expected me to argue, to get angry, to make a scene. She wanted to paint me as an uncooperative resident, a troublemaker. I stood up slowly. I do, Karen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I opened the folder. First, regarding the unsightly fence. As everyone here knows, my fence wasn't neglected. It was destroyed when your son, Brad Dawson, drove his car through it at 5 in the morning while under the influence of nitrous oxide. Here is a copy of the official police report detailing the incident. I placed a copy on the table in front of her. Her smile faltered. Second, I continued, my voice calm and steady. Regarding the daily fines for failure to repair, I have here a signed contract with a fence company. They are scheduled to begin work as soon as your insurance company, which is currently processing the claim from the accident, approves the payment. It's a bit difficult to repair a fence with money I don't have yet. Money your insurance is responsible for. Here is a copy of the claim and my correspondence with the adjuster. I placed another stack of papers on our table. The other board members were starting to look uncomfortable. My neighbors were now leaning forward, their boredom replaced by rapt attention. Third, about the grievous breach of non-standard screw patterns. Here is the original permit and inspection report from the city signed and approved 3 years ago. It explicitly states that the construction meets all codes. And here I added, pulling out another document, is the original HOA approval form for the fence signed by you, Karen, from 3 years ago. It seems you approved of the screw patterns back then. I dropped the final packet onto the growing pile. Her face had gone from smug to shocked to a deep, blotchy red. The room was dead silent. And finally, I said, turning to address the rest of the homeowners, this isn't about a fence or screws. This is about retaliation. Mrs. Dawson is attempting to use our HOA funds and our rules to punish my family because her son was arrested on my property for his own reckless actions. She is weaponizing our community against a resident to cover up for her own family's issues. This is a gross abuse of her position as president. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The real grievous breach here is a breach of trust. The real hazard is a president who thinks the rules apply to everyone but her own son. I sat down. The silence was broken by one of the board members, clearing his throat. Karen, he said nervously. Is this true? Karen just stared at the pile of documents on the table, as if it were a venomous snake. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had been so sure of her power, so certain that her authority was absolute. She never imagined that someone would come prepared. She never imagined that someone would have receipts. Karen slammed the gavel like she was putting down a rebellion. Out of order, the chair, a thin man in a cardigan, stood. My toddler's stroller was almost clipped last week on Oak by a blue car with a vacuum cleaner muffler. An older neighbor raised a trembling hand. Marine Corps 79. I've heard engines scream that night. They screamed from the back. A teenager in a hoodie muttered just loud enough. Brad's car sounds like a lawnmower with rabies. Chuckles rippled. Karen's allies studied their agendas as if the paper might save them. George, the quiet accountant, cleared his throat. Madame Presidente, the member is recognized. The documents are substantial. Karen grasped for the familiar. We will now revisit acceptable mailbox colors. Table that too, someone said. Seconded came 3 voices at once. Karen stared at me like she could find me by glare alone. I smiled back. Don't worry, I said. Well, use the approved shade of beige for the replacement fence, whatever number to spare is. My neighbor Mike, who was sitting in the back, chose that moment to lean over to the person next to him and say in a whisper that was somehow audible to the entire room. So I guess the fence didn't jump out at him after all. A few people snickered. The tension broke. The spell of Karen's authority was shattered. Another board member spoke up. I moved to table the discussion of these fines indefinitely. Seconded, another voice called out. Karen looked around the room, her eyes wild with panic, searching for an ally. She found none. All she saw were the disappointed, skeptical faces of her neighbors. Her attempt to publicly humiliate me had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. She had been exposed, but I knew this was far from over. Humiliating her was one thing. Stopping her was another. She was cornered now, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. We had won the battle of the HOA meeting, but to win the war, we still needed to find out what exactly was going on in that clubhouse late at night. The victory at the HOA meeting was satisfying, but it was temporary. We had dodged the fines, but Karen Dawson was still president. Her power was diminished but not gone. She was wounded, embarrassed, and that made her more dangerous, not less. She would be looking for any angle, any new way to come after us. Sam and I knew we couldn't just sit back and wait for the next attack. We had to be proactive. We had to get to the bottom of the street racing. The clue was the burner phone and the officer's reaction to it. Detective Miller later told us after they got a warrant that the phone's recent location, pings hit near the community clubhouse between midnight and 3:00 a.m. It was a strong lead, but we needed visual confirmation. We needed to see what was happening with our own eyes without being seen. "We need a spy in the sky," I said to Sam that night as we sat at the kitchen table brainstorming our next move. "Something quiet, something that can see in the dark." Sam's fingers were already dancing across her keyboard. "High-resolution night vision drone with a thermal camera and a quiet motor. I can have one here by tomorrow afternoon." I grinned. I love living in the future. The next day, we picked up a rental drone. It was a sleek black piece of technology, smaller and quieter than I had imagined. We spent the afternoon learning the controls, flying it around our backyard, getting a feel for its capabilities. The thermal camera was the real game changer. It could pick up heat signatures from car scent people even in total darkness. That night, we waited. We watched a movie, tried to relax, but the anticipation was a current humming beneath the surface. Around 11:30 p.m., we went into my office, which has a window with a clear line of sight towards the clubhouse, about a 4-mile away. Sam set up her laptop as the command center, the drone's feed displayed on the large monitor. I took the controls. "Operation Night Owl is a go," I whispered, trying to lighten the mood. I launched the drone from our back deck. We kept it under 400 FT with a strobe on, and only filmed the parking lot, never through windows. It rose silently into the dark sky, a nearly invisible black speck against the stars. I navigated it high above the neighborhood, then brought it down slowly over the clubhouse parking lot. At first, everything was dark and still. The parking lot was empty. The building was unlit. "Maybe we were wrong," Sam said, her voice tinged with disappointment. "Maybe it was a one-time thing." "Let's give it time," I said, my eyes glued to the screen. "Racers don't usually show up early." We waited for an hour. Nothing happened. The thermal camera showed nothing but cooling asphalt and the faint heat signatures of small animals moving in the bushes. He was starting to think Sam was right. Then at 12:45 a.m., a pair of headlights appeared down the main road. A car turned into the clubhouse, loading in the far corner away from the streetlights. It was the black Honda from the delivery van's dashcam footage. The thermal camera showed the engine glowing bright white with heat. A few minutes later, the dark blue Subaru arrived, parking next to it. Then another car, one we hadn't seen before, and another. Within 20 minutes, there were 5 modified cars parked in the shadows. The drone's camera was so clear, we could see the drivers getting out, their forms ghostly white and orange on the thermal feed. They gathered in a small group, their body language casual, familiar. They were comfortable here. This was their spot. They weren't just meeting. They were using the clubhouse itself. One of them walked up to a side door, a door that was supposed to be locked and only accessible to HOA staff. He fiddled with it for a moment, and then the door swung open. The whole crew filed inside. "They have a key," Sam breathed, her eyes wide. "How in the world did they get a key?" "I can think of one person who has a master key to every lock in this community," I said, my voice grim. "And who would do anything to make sure her precious son has a safe place to hang out with his friends?" It was all starting to make sense. Karen wasn't just turning a blind eye to her son's activities. She was actively enabling them. She had given them a sanctuary, a private clubhouse where they could meet and plan their races, hidden away from the rest of the world. The drone hovered silently, a ghost in the sky. We watched for another hour. We saw them bring out what looked like laptops and toolboxes. They were working on their cars right there in the parking lot under the cover of darkness. They were tuning engines, swapping parts. This was their garage, their command center. It was a brazen operation happening on community property, facilitated by the one person whose job it was to prevent this kind of thing. We recorded everything. We saved high-resolution video files, both in normal night vision and thermal. Plate sand faces came from the regular night vision camera. Thermal showed engine and body heat. We captured close-ups of the cars, their license plates, and the faces of the kids involved. Brad Dawson was there right in the middle of it all, looking more confident and cocky than he ever did in the daylight. We had them. We had undeniable proof of their secret meetings, their unauthorized use of the clubhouse, and the implicit conspiracy of Karen Dawson. This was bigger than a traffic violation. This was trespassing, conspiracy, and a massive liability for the entire homeowners association. As I piloted the drone back home, its battery running low, I felt a cold sense of resolve settle over me. This had gone far beyond a broken fence. Karen Dawson had compromised the safety and integrity of our entire neighborhood to protect their son. She had abused her power, lied to her neighbors, and enabled a crew of reckless street racers. Our evidence was strong. We had enough to move. Time tossed a trap. We could go to the police. We could go to the rest of the HOA board. But I had a feeling that wouldn't be enough. A simple complaint would get bogged down in bureaucracy. Karen would find a way to wriggle out of it. To blame a rogue employee for the key, to claim she had no idea what the kids were doing. To truly end this, we needed to do more than just expose them. We needed to catch them in the act in a way that no one could deny. We needed a trap. And I knew just the person to help me build it. Sam was already looking at me, a determined glint in her eyes. So, she said, what's the plan? How do we use this to shut them down for good? The drone footage was our smoking gun, but a gun is useless until you pull the trigger. We had proof they were meeting, but we needed to prove what they were doing. Going to the police with a video of kids hanging out in a parking lot, even with the racing context, might not be enough to spark the kind of serious investigation this deserved. We needed to connect their clubhouse meetings directly to the illegal racing. We needed to bait the hook. They're working on their cars there, I said, rewatching the thermal footage of them gathered around an open hood. That means they need parts. High-performance parts. The kind you don't buy at the local auto shop. Sam caught on immediately. So we become a seller, she said, a sly grin spreading across her face. We create a fake online profile, a private seller with exactly what they're looking for. This was Sam's world. She could build a digital identity from scratch that was more believable than most real people. She spent the next day creating our persona, Drift King 7. The profile picture was a generic shadowed image of a turbocharger. The bio was simple. Parting out a project car. JDM parts. Serious inquiries only. JDM, Japanese domestic market, was a buzzword in the import racing scene. It was the kind of detail that added instant credibility. Next came the bait itself. Sam researched the specific models of their cars. The Honda Civic SAI, the Subaru WRX, the Mustang GT. She found out what the most sought-after, hard-to-find performance parts were for those models. She settled on a slightly used high-flow fuel injector kit for a WRX. It was expensive enough to be desirable, but we'd listed at a price that was just a little too good to be true. A price that would make a young racer on a budget take a risk. She posted the fake ad on several local online marketplaces and forums known for car parts. She geotagged the post to our general area. Then we waited. For 2 days, there was nothing but a few lowball offers from people who were clearly not our target. I was starting to get discouraged. Maybe they're not looking for parts right now, I said. Patience, Cole, Sam said, not looking up from her monitor. The right fish will find the bait. She was right. On the third night, a message came in. The username was Subi0Arrow2. The message was short, written in text speak. Yo, you still got the injectors. Cash ready. Sam's fingers flew across the keyboard, adopting the persona of Drift King 77. Yay, man. Got them. Lots of interest, though. She was creating urgency, a classic sales tactic. Subi02 replied instantly. How much you want? I can meet tonight. Listed for 500 for you, 400 cash. Tonight only. Sam set the hook. $100 off was too good to pass up. After a brief back and forth, they agreed on a meeting place. We couldn't use our house, obviously. We needed a neutral public location with good lighting and plenty of escape routes for the police, not for him. We chose the Home Depot off Route 9. It would be well-lit and mostly empty at 10 p.m., the time they agreed upon. Now came the most critical part. This wasn't just a private sting operation. We were homeowners, not cops. We needed to bring in law enforcement, but we had to do it the right way. Going to the local precinct with a story about a fake fuel injector sale could get us laughed out of the building. We needed to talk to the right people. I did some research and found the direct number for the county's traffic division. I didn't call the main dispatcher. I called the administrative line and asked to speak with the detective in charge of street racing enforcement. After getting transferred twice, I finally got Detective Miller on the line. I laid out the whole story calmly and methodically. I started with the crash, the police report number, Brad Dawson's arrest. Then I told him about the delivery Vandish cam footage showing the organized race. I told him about our drone surveillance of the HOA clubhouse, the unauthorized access, the late-night meets, and finally I told him about our bait operation. The messages with Subi02, and the meet scheduled for that night. I could hear him typing as I spoke. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Maddox, he said finally, his voice serious. You and your wife have built a very compelling case. You've done more legwork than some of my own rookies. This racing crew, we've been getting complaints about them for months, but they're like ghosts. They change locations, use burner phones. We've never been able to pin them down. Well, I said, it looks like they're meeting at $10 tonight in the parking lot of the Home Depot off Route 9. Don't do anything, he said, his voice firm. Do not go to that meeting. Let my team handle this. We'll set up surveillance. Your seller just needs to not show up. They'll wait around for a bit, get frustrated, and that's when we'll see who we're dealing with. Can you forward me all the evidence you have, the videos, the screenshots of the conversation? It's already being uploaded to a secure cloud folder, Sam said from beside me. I'll text you the link and password, Detective. Miller sounded impressed. You two are something else. Okay, we'll take it from here. We'll have unmarked units in place by 9:30. Stay home. Stay safe. And nice work. We hung up, relief and adrenaline. Now we waited. That night felt like the longest of my life. Lights off. Movie pretending. Phones up. We started the machine. Now we were just spectators. At 10:15 p.m., a text buzzed. Blue Subaru on scene. We're watching. Sit tight. 20 minutes later, another text. Honda in silver Mustang in group forming a round blue Subaru. Same Mustang, different plate. These kids swap tags like jerseys. We're going to move in about 5 minutes, Miller said. I'll call you when it's over. And Mr. Maddox, thanks, he hung up. Sam and I just looked at each other in the dark. This was it. The culmination of weeks of stress, planning, and sleepless nights. We had poked the hornets' nest, and now the exterminators were moving in. We had given the police the opening they needed. We had turned Karen Dawson's secret world of privilege and protection inside out. But as I sat there listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. This wasn't just about catching some kids. This was about a fundamental breakdown in our community, orchestrated by one woman's arrogance. And I had a feeling that even with her son's crew in a police net, Karen Dawson's fight was far from over. The real question was, what would she do when she found out who had set the trap? The silence in our house was a living thing. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside sounded like a gunshot. My phone lay on the coffee table between Sam and me, a dark rectangle holding all the potential outcomes. We were completely in the dark, and my mind was filling in the blanks with 100 different scenarios, most of them bad. What if they scattered? What if there was a chase? What if someone got hurt? This had started with a simple desire to fix my fence and hold a kid accountable. Now, it felt like we had instigated a major police operation. The weight of that responsibility was heavy. An hour passed, then another. It was after midnight. Maybe we should call him, Sam said, her voice small. No, I said more forcefully than I intended. He said he'd call. He's busy. We just have to wait. The waiting was the hardest part. It was a complete surrender of control. Our part of the job was done, and the outcome was now in the hands of strangers. Finally, at nearly 100 a.m., my phone lit up. It was Detective Miller. I snatched it up and put it on speaker. Maddox, I said, my voice. It's Miller. It's done. I could hear the exhaustion and the satisfaction in his voice. Everyone's in custody. Sam let out a long, shaky breath beside me. I felt a knot in my stomach I hadn't even realized was there begin to loosen. What happened? I asked. Your bait worked perfectly, Miller explained. The 3 cars showed up just like I said. The kids got out, started looking around for their cellar. They were getting impatient. My guys moved in with twin-marked vans, blocked the only 2 exits to the parking lot, pinned them in perfectly. He paused and I could hear him chuckle grimly. They were so surprised they looked like deer in the headlights for a second. Then they scattered. My heart rate kicked up again. A chase? A short one? He said on foot. They abandoned their cars and ran. Most of them didn't get more than 20 mi before my uniformed officers who were waiting in the wings tackled them. They're not exactly marathon runners. One of them, the driver of the Honda, made it a little further. Led one of my guys on a 200-yard dash through the garden section of the store. He tried to hide in a rack of tiki torches. Didn't work. I could picture the scene perfectly. A bunch of overconfident kids whose only skill was pushing a gas pedal, suddenly finding themselves out of their element, outmatched by professionals. It was a pathetic end to their reign of terror. What about Brad Dawson? I asked, holding my breath. Oh yeah, he was there, Miller confirmed. He was the first one we identified. Tried to tell us he was just there to buy a video game. A little hard to explain why he was meeting in a deserted parking lot at 10 p.m. with the rest of his racing buddies. He didn't run. He just stood there looking shocked like he couldn't believe this was happening to him. Mommy wasn't there to bail him out this time. The relief was immense. We got him. We got them all. So what happens now? I asked. The cars are being impounded as we speak, Miller said. We're taking the kids down to the station. Since most of them are minors, their parents are going to get a rude awakening in about an hour. They'll likely be charged with conspiracy to engage in illegal speed contests. Maybe some reckless endangerment charges depending on what else we find. The driver who ran will get an extra charge for resisting arrest. And the cars, thinking of the expensive machines now in a police lot, we'll be going through them with a fine-tooth comb, Miller said. We'll check the VINs against the plates, check for stolen parts, illegal modifications. This is just the beginning for these kids. He sounded pleased. We had handed him a gift-wrapped case, and he had executed it flawlessly. I can't thank you enough, Detective, for taking us seriously. No, Mr. Maddox, he replied, and his voice was sincere. Thank you. You and your wife did the right thing. You saw something wrong. You gathered evidence, and you came to us. You helped make your community safer tonight. Get some sleep. I'll be in touch tomorrow with a full report." He hung up. Sam and I sat in silence for a long time, the news sinking in. It was over. The late-night meetings, the roaring engines, the constant threat. It was all over. We had done it. We had fought back, not with anger or aggression, but with patience, technology, and a solid plan. We had protected our home. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a cold reality set in. We had just orchestrated the arrest of the HOA president's son for a second time. We had dismantled his entire crew. When Karen Dawson got that call from the police station in the middle of the night, it wouldn't take her long to figure out who was behind it. The anonymous seller who never showed up. The sudden, perfectly timed police raid. She would know. Her war of HOA fines had failed. Her son's secret world had been exposed. She had been beaten. But I knew a woman like Karen Dawson wouldn't accept defeat. She would be cornered, desperate, and looking for one last devastating way to strike back. The police sting was a major victory, but it felt like we had just won a battle, not the war. The final showdown was yet to come. The next morning, Detective Miller called as promised. His voice was all business. "Mr. Maddox, we're getting some interesting results from the impounded vehicles. The plates in the blue Subaru came back registered to a minivan in a different state. The Honda had a plate that belonged to a pickup truck that was reported stolen 2 months ago. These kids weren't just racing. They were covering their tracks with stolen plates. This was a significant escalation. This wasn't just about traffic violations anymore. This was organized criminal activity. During the standard impound inventory, we found a commercial key in the Subaru's glove box, a tag labeled 317. Based on that, we obtained a warrant for the associated storage unit. My mind started racing. A storage unit? That's what we're thinking, he said. We're running the address of the storage facility right now. It's a long shot. But if these kids were organized enough to swap plates, they're organized enough to have a stash house for their gear. I'll let you know what we find." The call ended, leaving Sam and me to process the new information. Stolen plates, a secret storage unit. This crew was far more sophisticated than we had imagined. They were a little criminal enterprise operating right in the heart of our manicured suburb. Karen Dawson wasn't just enabling a little harmless teenage fun. She was harboring a gang of criminals. Later that afternoon, Miller called back. The excitement in his voice was unmistakable. "Bingo," he said without any preamble. "We found the facility unit 317. The manager confirmed it was rented 2 months ago. Cash payment, fake name. We got a warrant and just opened it up. Mr. Maddox, you are not going to believe this." He took a deep breath. "It's an entire workshop. We've got tool chests filled with high-end equipment, probably stolen. We've got a stack of car stereos still in their boxes, serial numbers scratched off. And we have plates, dozens of them, license plates from at least 10 different states, all stacked up like dinner plates." Sam and I listened, stunned into silence. It was a treasure trove of evidence. "But that's not the best part," Miller went on, his voice rising with excitement. "We found a ledger, a little black notebook. It details everything. Dates of races, locations, who won, how much money was bet and exchanged. It even lists jobs, what looks like a log of car stereos they've boosted, and parts they've stolen to order. And you know who was keeping the books? Your boy Brad Dawson. His handwriting is all over it. This was it, the final nail in the coffin. A detailed record of their entire operation in Brad's own hand. There was no way his mother could spin this. There was no way she could claim he was just a follower, a kid who fell in with the wrong crowd. He was the bookkeeper. He was at the center of the conspiracy. This changes everything." Miller said, "This elevates the charges from misdemeanor to felonies. We're looking at possession of stolen property, grand larceny, conspiracy. These kids are in a world of trouble." The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. It wasn't just about a racing crew anymore. It was about a theft ring operating out of the HOA clubhouse. People were furious. The trust in Karen Dawson hadn't just been broken. It had been vaporized. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, and this time we didn't even have to attend. We heard from our neighbors that it was a bloodbath. Karen was removed as president in a unanimous vote of no confidence. Hurtwu cronies on the board resigned in disgrace. An interim president was appointed, a quiet accountant named George, who immediately promised a full audit of the HOA's finances and a complete change of all the locks on community properties. Karen Dawson was stripped of her power, her reputation in ruins. Her perfect suburban world had crumbled around her, all because she couldn't or wouldn't control her own son. But her downfall wasn't our primary concern. Our goal was justice and restitution for the damage done. The discovery of the storage unit and ledger ensured that the case was now rock solid. The district attorney's office was taking it very seriously. A few weeks later, we were contacted by the DA's office. They were preparing for the court date and wanted to walk us through our testimony. We were the primary witnesses. Our actions, from the initial 911 call to the drone footage to the online bait, had formed the backbone of the entire investigation. We met with a young, sharp prosecutor named Miss Davies. She was impressed with the meticulous file of evidence Sam had compiled. "I've been doing this for 10 years, she said, looking through the printed screenshots and video logs. "And I've never had a case handed to me so perfectly wrapped. You two did an incredible job." We told her everything from the beginning. The crash, Karen's immediate and aggressive attempts to blame us, the HOA fines, everything. Miss Davies listened intently, taking notes. "This pattern of behavior from the mother is important," she said. "It speaks to a long history of enabling and covering up for her son. We can use that to establish motive and intent. She wasn't just an ignorant parent. She was an active co-conspirator and shielding him from the consequences of his actions." The court date was set. Brad and the core organizers were charged as adults due to the felony counts. Theirs faced juvenile proceedings. Their parents had hired a team of expensive lawyers who would no doubt try to paint them as misguided children who made a few mistakes. And at the center of that defense, we knew, would be Karen Dawson. She would take the stand to defend her son, to portray him as the victim. The storage unit was the twist that had turned a local nuisance into a serious criminal case. But I had a feeling the real drama, the real unraveling, wouldn't happen until Karen Dawson had to face a courtroom and answer for her lies under oath. The stage was set for the final act. All our evidence was locked and loaded. All that was left was a showdown. The day of the court appearance was gray and overcast, a perfect match for the mood inside the sterile wood-paneled courtroom. The air was thick with tension and the cheap smell of floor polish. Sam and I sat in the front row right behind the prosecutor, Miss Davies. Across the aisle sat the defendants, Brad Dawson and his crew, looking small and scared in ill-fitting suits, flanked by their parents and a team of high-priced lawyers. Karen Dawson was there, of course, seated right behind her son. Her face was a pale, tight mask of defiance. She refused to look in our direction, but I could feel the heat of her glare. The proceedings began. Ms. Davies was brilliant. She was calm, organized, unrelentless. She laid out the case piece by piece, building an unshakable mountain of evidence. She started with the 911 call Sam had made on the morning of the crash. The audio recording played over the courtroom speakers, Sam's calm, factual voice describing the scene. Then came the testimony of the first responding officer. He described Brad's disorientation, the failed sobriety test, and the discovery of the nitrous bottle. His body cam footage was played on a large screen showing Karen Dawson's hysterical and false accusations that my fence had jumped out at her son. The jury watched, their faces impassive but attentive. Next, Miss Davies presented the delivery van's dash cam footage. Marcus briefly testified to authenticate it, and the company's custodian of records letter was entered. The clip of the cars staging for a race, and then the clip of them tearing down our residential street, their engines screaming, was damning. There was no ambiguity. Then came our drone footage. The judge admitted the drone videos shot from public airspace. The courtroom was silent as the grainy thermal images played on the screen, showing the crew using their secret key to enter the clubhouse, working on their cars in the dead of night. Miss Davies called an expert who testified that the heat signatures were consistent with recently driven high-performance engines. The web was getting tighter. The bait and sting operation was detailed. Next, Detective Miller took the stand and described the entire operation from my initial phone call to the foot chase through the hardware store's garden section. He presented the evidence of the stolen license plates found on the cars. The case against the boys was overwhelming. Their lawyers could barely muster a cross-examination. They were just going through the motions. Finally, the contents of the storage unit were revealed. Photographs of the stolen tools, the car stereos, and the dozens of license plates were displayed for the jury. And then came the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. The ledger. A forensic handwriting expert testified that the writing in the book was a definitive match for Brad Dawson's. Miss Davies read excerpts from the ledger aloud, detailing the profits from stolen goods and the winnings from illegal races. The defense's strategy was a desperate one. They tried to portray the boys as nonviolent offenders, kids who just loved cars and made some bad choices. Their only hope was to generate sympathy to minimize the severity of their crimes. And the star witness for that strategy was Karen Dawson. She took the stand dressed in a conservative navy blue suit, the very picture of a concerned, respectable mother. Her lawyer began by asking her about Brad's childhood, painting a picture of a sweet, misunderstood boy. Karen played her part perfectly, her voice trembling with emotion as she described her son's passion for mechanics. Then it was Miss Davies' turn to cross-examine. She approached the witness stand, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp as glass. "Mrs. Dawson," she began, "you've painted a picture of your son as a gentle soul who simply loves cars. Is that correct?" "Yes," Karen said, dabbing a corner of her eye with a tissue. "He's a good boy. He just fell in with the wrong crowd." "The wrong crowd?" Miss Davies repeated. "Mrs. Dawson, your son wasn't just a member of this crowd. He was the bookkeeper. He was tracking the profits from their criminal activities. Does that sound like a passive follower to you?" Karen's composure started to crack. He was forced into it. They pressured him. "Is there any evidence of that? Any testimony to suggest he was coerced?" Ms. Davies asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Karen admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Miss Davies then pivoted. "Mrs. Dawson, let's talk about the HOA clubhouse. The prosecution has shown that your son and his friends had a key and were using the facility as their late-night headquarters. As the HOA president at the time, were you aware of this?" "Absolutely not," Karen said, her voice regaining some of its old fire. "I would never permit such a thing. A staff member must have been careless with a key." "A careless staff member," Miss Davies said, nodding thoughtfully. She then produced a document. "This is a log from the HOA security contractor. It details every time a master key was signed out. It shows that you, Mrs. Dawson, signed out a master key 2 months prior to the arrests. It also shows that this key was never signed back in. Can you explain that?" Karen stared at the document, her face ashen. I lost it. I reported it lost, did you?" Miss Davies countered, producing another document. "Because these are the official minutes from all HOA board meetings during that period. There is no mention of a lost master key. In fact, there is no record of you ever reporting it missing at all. Why would you fail to report a missing key that could grant access to every facility in the community, Mrs. Dawson? Unless it wasn't lost. Unless you gave it to your son." The courtroom was suddenly silent. Karen Dawson opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked at her lawyer, who could offer no help. She looked at her son, whose head was buried in his hands. She was caught. Hurley's had completely unraveled under the bright, unforgiving lights of the courtroom. She had perjured herself. "Tu was just trying to protect my son," she finally stammered, tears now streaming down her face. But these were not tears of remorse. They were tears of defeat. "It was over." Karen Dawson broke on the stand. Her lies died under oath. The jury didn't take long. They found Brad and his crew guilty on the felony counts. You can't bully the truth. Sentencing came fast. No long prison terms because of age, but it wasn't a slap on the wrist. Probation, hundreds of hours of community service, restitution for stolen goods and damage. The biggest check was for my fence. The Dawson family paid in full, plus a little extra the DA added for property aesthetics. We also got a 5-year no-contact order. No more surprise visits. No more shouting on my lawn. A clean line between our houses and our lives. A week later, a for sale sign popped up in the Dawsons' yard. No one protested. The neighborhood seemed to breathe again. At the emergency HOA meeting, the board voted out Karen and chose George, the quiet accountant, as president. He wrecked every community lock and started an audit. Then he pushed through term limits and an outside review committee. Power went back to the people who live here, not one person's ego. I didn't rebuild with cedar. That felt like stepping back into the same mistake. We went with black steel, strong, clean. At the corner where the Mustang had entered my life, I set 2 fat ballards in deep concrete. A simple message. Not again. Mike came by, walked the line, and tapped a bar with his knuckle. Wowers, Cole. That fence ain't jumping out at nobody. I laughed. That's the idea. One night, Sam and I stood on the porch and watched the street calm down to what it should be. Kids on bikes, a dog walker, distant talk. "Do you think we went too far?" she asked. I thought about the crash, the late-night meetings, the Lees, and all the chances they had to stop. I thought about what could have happened if that car hit a person and not my boards. "No," I said. "We went as far as we had to." We stood up. "We did it clean, and we made this place safe. In my office, there's a small frame on the wall. Not a diploma, not a photo. It's the carbon copy of the tow receipt from that first silver Mustang. It reminds me why we push back. Peace is worth fighting for. Stubborn helps when it's tied to facts, and there's nothing stronger than a calm man with a plan and a smart woman at the keyboard. The fence stands now. The ballards shine a little in the sun. The neighborhood talks more and whispers less. The Dawsons moved in. We move forward.